4 countries looked at the same problem. 3 billion people who needed a motorcycle. Not for weekends, not for hobbies, for survival, for moving goods and children and medicine across roads that would destroy anything expensive. 4 countries said, "We'll build that bike." 3 of them failed. One of them built something that has now been in continuous production for 50 years. Something that has outsold every Harley-Davidson ever made, across all models, across all time, by several times over. This isn't a listicle. It's an autopsy of an industry, and most Americans have never heard of it. Why this matters to Americans. Let's talk about what Americans actually do with motorcycles. We spend an average of $15,000 on a bike. Finance it for 5 years, ride it on weekends, maybe. Here's the reality. 80% of American motorcycle trips are under 10 miles. Commuting, errands, local rides. But we're paying BMW GS money for grocery runs. Meanwhile, there are 3 billion people on 3 continents who figured out a better way. They use motorcycles the way motorcycles were meant to be used. Daily transportation, not weekend toys. In Pakistan, a motorcycle is how you get to work, deliver your goods, get your kids to school, and earn income, all on one bike, all in one day. In Brazil, around 1 million motorcycle couriers spend 12 to 14 hours a day on a single bike, keeping an entire urban economy moving. In Nigeria, 8 million commercial motorcycle taxis carry people through cities where cars literally cannot go. One bike, to feed their families, not a hobby, a lifeline. It commands over 85% of the motorcycle market in a country of 240 million people. It runs the informal economy of Brazil. It was captured in Afghanistan and is now sitting in the Imperial War Museum in London. So I ranked the 4 countries that tried to build it, not in American showrooms, in actual harsh conditions where bikes have to work. Number 4 will surprise no one. Number 1 will blow your mind. Country number 4, China. The race to the bottom. Let's start with China, number 4 on this list. Chinese manufacturers tried to dominate the global motorcycle market the same way they dominated everything else. Flood the market with cheap products. In the 2000s and 2010s, Chinese bikes were everywhere. Africa alone had over 100 Chinese motorcycle brands competing simultaneously. Prices were unbeatable. $600, $700, sometimes less for a complete motorcycle. But there was a problem. Actually, 3 problems. Problem number 1, material quality. The metal was soft, frames cracked, bolts stripped, chains snapped. In Rwanda, they call cheap Chinese motorcycles one-year bikes, because after a year, most are done. Not worn, structurally finished. Problem number 2, no parts network. When your Chinese bike breaks down, and it will, you can't find parts. The factory that made it doesn't exist anymore. Or it does, but it's making blenders now. Meanwhile, you're stuck with a $700 pile of metal. Problem number 3, no service support. No training for mechanics, no technical manuals, no warranty. You're completely on your own. The result? Most of those Chinese brands are gone, crushed by companies that actually cared about quality and service. China tried to win on price alone. They lost. Country number 3, Italy and Europe, built for the wrong world. Number 3, Italy and Europe. Italian and European motorcycles are beautiful. Ducati, BMW, Triumph, works of art. But here's the problem. They're designed for people who have $25,000 to spend on a hobby. Problem number 1, price. The average Ducati costs $18,000. In most of the world, that's multiple years of salary. You're not buying transportation, you're buying garage art. Problem number 2, impractical for real-world use. Ducatis require valve adjustments every 7,500 miles by trained technicians with special tools. Great if you live near a dealer, useless if the nearest one is 500 miles away. And they're built for smooth European roads, not the potholes and dust across most of the planet. The result? Italian and European brands have essentially zero market share in Africa, South Asia, and most of Latin America. Incredible machines for weekend rides in California, completely impractical everywhere else. Country number 2, India, the fake-out. Now we get to the number 2 country, and this is where it gets interesting. Look, I need to be clear about something. I have massive respect for what Indian manufacturers have done in these markets. Bajaj, Hero, TVS. These companies figured out something China never did and Europe never bothered to try. They understood the actual need. Bajaj operates over 3,000 service centers across Africa. In Uganda, the Bajaj Boxer holds over 80% of the motorcycle taxi market. In Nigeria, over 40% market share. They train tens of thousands of local mechanics. They flooded markets with spare parts. They customize their bikes for local conditions. Stiffer suspensions for rough roads, engines calibrated for low-quality fuel. That is real excellence, so why is India at number 2? Problem number 1. They came second. The motorcycle at number 1 entered these markets in 1976. Bajaj's serious push came decades later. In markets where trust has been built over 3 generations of riders, being 20 years late is not a gap you close quickly. The number 1 bike didn't just get there first, it became the word for motorcycle in some regions. Problem number 2, the culture gap. Bajaj built a strong ecosystem. The number 1 bike built something deeper. 50 years of continuous local production, so embedded that competitors who are 30% cheaper still can't take meaningful share. You don't compete with that on a service center count. You compete with it on generations of trust. Don't get me wrong, in many African markets, Bajaj has already won outright. Hero and TVS are growing faster than anyone. But there is still one motorcycle, one country, one decision made in 1974 that changed everything, and it is not Indian. And that's why India is number 2 on this list, not number 1. The map. Take a look at your screen right now. Every region lighting up on that map is a market where one motorcycle, one engine design from one country has been the dominant choice for decades. Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Nepal, Uganda, Colombia, not because of marketing, not because of advertising, because of what it actually is. Country number 1 is Japan, and the motorcycle is the Honda CG125. The reveal, that's the bike, the Honda CG125. You've been watching footage of it this whole time, and most of you didn't know its name. That is the point. Here are the numbers. Honda's factory in Manaus, Brazil, their largest motorcycle plant outside Japan, has produced over 31 million motorcycles since 1976. The Honda CG series is the most produced motorized vehicle in Brazilian history. More than the Volkswagen Gol, more than the Volkswagen Beetle, more than any car Brazil has ever made. In Pakistan, Atlas Honda sold over 1.4 million motorcycles in 2025. In a single month, May 2025, they sold over 130,000 units. One model, one market. Harley-Davidson, America's most iconic brand, has produced an estimated 5 to 8 million motorcycles across every model in their entire 120-year history. The Honda CG125 platform has conservatively produced several times that, and that doesn't count the 100-plus Chinese manufacturers who cloned the engine. This is the most important motorcycle Honda ever built, and most Americans have never heard of it. So how did Japan succeed where China, Italy, and India couldn't? 3 reasons why Japan won. Reason number 1, they actually went and looked. May 1974, Honda engineer Takeshi Inagaki and head of design Inosuke Miyachi board a plane at Haneda Airport. Their assignment: 1 month in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Pakistan, and Iran, on the roads, not in boardrooms. What they found shocked them. Inagaki wrote, "It was normal to see a child on the tank and the wife on the back with 2 to 4 people riding together. Some people loaded vegetables, chickens, and pigs onto their motorcycles. I even saw motorcycles towing loaded carts. That is not a weekend toy. That is a freight vehicle, a family car, and a commercial truck, all in one." On top of that, maintenance was non-existent. Oil turned to sludge, air filters became solid with dust. Riders kept going until the bike stopped. Honda's existing overhead cam bikes couldn't survive it. The cam chains failed first, farthest from the oil pump. Miss one oil change in Bangkok heat, and you were done. So Honda went back to Tokyo with a decision that went against everything they stood for. Don't improve the technology, go backward. Build something that doesn't need the things that break. Reason number 2. They built the wrong engine on purpose. Honda had built their reputation on overhead cam engines, cutting edge, race-derived. For the CG125, they threw all of that out. A pushrod overhead valve engine. Simpler, no cam chain to wear out, no overhead bearings to fail when the oil went black. The night Inagaki presented his design, Honda's managing director, Tadashi Kume, later Honda's president, independently sketched the exact same solution on graph paper. 2 engineers, same answer. That's how obvious the direction was. They flattened the top of the fuel tank specifically so a small child could sit on it in front of the rider. That one detail tells you everything about who Honda was actually building for. Before launch, Honda ran a test in Thailand. Local mechanics, zero prior training, stripped and reassembled the top end, done in 20 minutes. Engine started on the first kick. That was the standard. Not horsepower, not lap times. First kick, every time, anywhere on Earth. And the best part, any roadside mechanic can keep one of these running for decades with nothing but a basic metric socket set. I've linked the toolkit I'd use in the description. Reason number 3, they built it where people actually lived. Honda moved production to these markets, a factory in Manaus, Brazil, in 1976, local manufacturing in Pakistan through Atlas Honda. Brazil's CG models were eventually 98% locally produced, built in Brazil, with Brazilian supply chains, for Brazilian roads. They trained local mechanics. They built parts networks. They adapted to local conditions as the primary brief, not an afterthought. China shipped a product. Europe ignored the market. India built a strong network but arrived decades late. Honda built an infrastructure, and that infrastructure became the backbone of daily life for hundreds of millions of people. Let me tell you a quick story that makes this real. There's a Honda CG125 in the Imperial War Museum in London, not a donated model, a captured one. On May 4th, 2011, British soldiers from 1st Battalion the Rifles in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, found 2 Taliban scouts using a motorcycle to track troop movements. They captured it. Pakistani-manufactured Honda CG125, Atlas Honda, Sheikhupura, now a museum exhibit. The museum's own caption says the bike was chosen because it gave them freedom of movement and helped them blend in with the local population. Not fast, not cheap, invisible. When the most powerful military alliance on Earth is fighting an insurgency, and the enemy's reconnaissance vehicle is a $400 motorcycle from a factory in Pakistan, because it is literally indistinguishable from every other bike on the road. That is not transportation anymore. That is the infrastructure of a society. That's what we've been talking about. Why Americans are missing out. So here's the question. If this motorcycle has been running the world for 50 years, why don't Americans know about it? 3 reasons. Reason number 1. Brand perception. Americans think expensive equals quality. We assume a $20,000 bike must be better than a $900 bike. But that's not how 3 billion people in Africa, Asia, and Latin America think. They judge bikes by one metric. Does it work? And by that standard, this bike has proven itself for 50 years. Reason number 2. Limited marketing. Honda never brought the CG125 to the US market. 0 dealers, 0 advertising. If a product doesn't market to you, you act like it doesn't exist. American motorcycle journalism is built around the audience that buys $20,000 adventure bikes, because that's what pays for advertising. Reason number 3. Limited availability. Until recently, you couldn't buy most of these bikes in America, but that's changing. The Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, same philosophy that succeeded in harsh conditions worldwide, starts at about $6,000 in America today. Simple, reliable, affordable, designed for actual riding, not Instagram. Now let's be realistic. You're not taking this on an American interstate at 80 miles per hour for hours. That's not what it's built for. But look at how Americans actually ride. 80% of motorcycle trips under 10 miles. Commuting, errands, local rides. For that kind of riding, which is most riding, a $5,000 to $6,000 bike absolutely works. The same conditions that built this motorcycle's legend, they exist in rural Montana, rural Texas, rural Arizona. If a Honda CG125 can handle Helmand Province, Afghanistan, it can handle your commute. Here's what's happening right now in 2026. Honda's Pakistan and Brazil operations are both in major expansion mode. The platform is not slowing down, it is accelerating. The rest of the world figured this out 50 years ago. The question is when America catches up. So here's my question for you. Would you actually buy a $5,000 to $6,000 Honda-derived motorcycle? Or does made in Japan, the expensive version, still matter more to you? Be brutally honest in the comments. No judgment, just real talk. I'll pin the best answers. And if you've ever ridden a CG125, a CG150, a CG160 Titan, anywhere in the world, I want your story. How many kilometers? What it survived? What it meant? Because the people who actually know this motorcycle understand something the Western motorcycle world still hasn't figured out. Hit like if this changed how you think about motorcycles. Subscribe for more content that challenges what the industry tells you. Thanks for watching.